thing to be feeling in a situation like this. And so that meaning making process is going on simultaneously. So what can we do about that? Well, I think the sense giving process is extremely important here. These conversations, these thoughts are happening with you or without you. And so you need to interject yourself into that process. You need, and it's not like sense shoving it down their throat. It's sense giving, right? You're not sense dictating, you're sense giving, which means you're becoming a part of the conversation and driving your people in a certain way of thinking. And that can be very complicated, especially in a time when you're not sure what's happening. And where people are looking for some leadership that's going to really take the wheel, it can be very difficult for you to be passing over, what for you to be making sense of all of this and then translating that for your people. How do you do that, and how do you get people to buy into that? So we're going to talk about decisive leadership in a second, but leadership has always been, as much as it has been about this very decisive and command and control leadership, there's always been this other form of leadership, this servant leadership, this leadership from within, that has always been important, and we've been learning how important it is, and it's important today. One of my favorite experiments, they brought a whole bunch of people into the participants of this experiment were all put in a single room, this very large room. It was a completely nondescript room, except on the walls, there were giant posters that had letters. So there was A over here, and a B, and a C, and a D. And they gave all of the participants the same instructions. They gave them 3 instructions. They said, always stay within an arm's length of at least one other person when in this room. They said, do not communicate or touch anyone in any way, not verbally, don't motion to them, nothing. And 3, we want you to walk aimlessly until we tell you the study is over. So they have to walk aimlessly around this room while staying within an arm's reach of at least one other person and not communicating in any way. Seems simple. But right before the experiment, they grab 3 of the people and they say, you guys are going to be our Confederates, you're inside people. All of the rules remain the same for you except one. We want you to walk randomly within this room. We want you to walk in this room. We want you to stay within an arm's reach of everybody in this room. We want you to make absolute sure that you are not communicating in any way with anybody else. But instead of walking randomly, we want you to make your way to marker B. And so they let everybody loose into this room. And you see this clumping of people and everybody, it's migratory patterns that everybody is sort of moving this way and that. And lo and behold, very quickly, everybody in the room ends up at marker B. What's fascinating about this is that after the experiment, the researchers asked the participants how they ended up at marker B, and none of them knew. Nobody would even believe that they had been led there. They all felt that it was a part of chance, that it was just chance that they had made it there. Nobody actually believed that they had been led by these 3 individuals in this large group. That's kind of sense giving, right? It's being part of the conversation and leading people from within. It's walking the walk and letting people grow from you and follow you without ever realizing that they're following you. That, I would argue, is true leadership. And so when we're going through this, keeping a positive attitude and keeping our eye on the ball and really making sense of this and understanding the greater meaning of how our organization is going to survive this and thrive going on, and the role that our organization plays in this and why we're so critical in this time is so important. I hear so many business professionals who say, yeah, well, I do such and such, and it's completely irrelevant now. Nobody wants to hear from me. I don't want to sell. And the truth is that these are oftentimes people with services that are desperately needed right now. we need so many things right now, but people are scared to go out and sell their services because they're thinking of it the wrong way. They don't understand the greater meaning of their organization and how it should impact their customers' lives and lives of people who are going through this situation. When we look at crisis management, not only are we looking for leadership from within, but we're looking for decisive and confident managers. We're looking for decisive and confident leadership. I was watching the news way too often, and I heard this commentator talking about Cuomo, the governor of New York, and talking about how this guy was never exactly loved, even within his own party before all this, because he was abrasive and and opinionated, and he said it as it was, and etc. But since the corona outbreak, he has been a rising star through this. And that's because that old fashioned kind of command and control, that old fashioned kind of confident leadership where we feel like somebody has taken the wheel, is extremely important in times like these. I always call myself a hippie when it comes to leadership. And I really believe in leading from within. And as evidenced by that experiment of leading from within, that's my jam. However, in times like this, it is equally important to take the wheel and for people to feel like there's somebody in control. And if any of you are parents or spouses or confidants, friends, mentors, whatever, people are looking for leadership in a time like this, and they're looking for somebody who is going to not be waffling back and forth, but somebody who is going to take decisive action. The interesting part of this is that we haven't thrown out that inside leadership, that servant leadership. We want people that are decisive, but at the same time, people who are flexible and collaborative. And this comes from a series of studies, which includes military, medicine, all these places where you see crisis management all the time. They find that these are the most successful leaders, the ones who are decisive and flexible at the same time, confident and collaborative at the same time. And there's many reasons for this. And I know a lot of this would make your head explode. Like, wait, do you want me to be a strong command and control leader? Or do you want me to be one of those hippy dippy, collaborative, democratic leaders? No, we want you to be both at the same time. And it's not impossible. We want you to know that you are to be confident in you having your hands on the wheels, that you've got a grasp of this, that you have made sense of this, that you understand where we fit into this big picture. At the very same time, we want to know that you are not so stubborn that you're not constantly taking in new information, and that you're not open to all of the constantly changing information, and that you're not thinking that you know everything, but instead you're going to the experts, you're reaching out to your frontline workers and collaborating with them because they see it from the front lines. And so we look for leaders who are going to be collaborative. And collaboration is also so important because when people are feeling helpless, which we're going to talk about, the best thing that you could do for them is make them feel like they're part of the solution. Give them a role to play in this. And by reaching out to them and collaborating with them and picking their brain and asking them what they're seeing and asking them what they're thinking, that gives them a sense of purpose and a sense of meaning, and it gives them a sense that they are somehow in control of all this, even to a limited degree. So really, I can't stress enough how important it is for you to walk this tightrope between being that decisive and confident leader, but also being flexible and collaborative at the same time. When facing adversity, you don't want to overly focus on what you are. You want to focus on who you are. So right now, everybody was getting sick and tired of authenticity as being like maybe the most overused term ever. Well, we've moved on, and now we're all talking about pivoting. right? Pivot is the new authenticity from what I'm seeing. And everybody's talking about pivot, 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 pivot. If you are too focused on what you are, then how are you ever going to pivot? If you are, I used to own an ice cream shop. And if I was so focused on being in the ice cream business, when the Great Recession hit and I had that ice cream shop, and so suddenly people didn't want to pay $5 for ice creams, and my ice creams were very expensive. And people started moving toward frozen yogurt and getting healthier, then I should have been out of business because what we were was an ice cream shop. But that was never who we were as an ice cream shop. Who we were focused on making Baltimore a happier and better place. And so how could we do that? We could brighten people's day in multiple ways. So it was easy to pivot to catering and cakes and all sorts of different things. We have a cleaning service that comes to our house every other week. And so I call them, I'm like, don't come. I was surprised they were going to continue to come, but I'm like, don't come. And I've got 5 kids, so it was very brave of me to say, stop coming. But I called them and said, we're not interested until all this clears up. And they said they completely understood. A couple days later, I got a phone call from them. They said, we totally understand you don't want us in your home right now. Is there anything else we can help you with? We can do your shopping for you. We can run some errands for you. How can we help? It's so clear to this company that cleaning is what they do, but who they are a service company. They are there to serve. And so they were able to pivot toward that and serve in any way possible, keep their people employed, keep their business moving. And so we don't want to overly focus on what we are. We want to focus on who we are. The other thing in times like this is that you don't want to over focus on where you are. The sense making, as we talked about, is so important. You need to know where you are in this moment because that's the difference of survival oftentimes, right? And that seems like a full-time job in itself. Understanding all of the crazy loans and requirements. And I saw people screenshotting, small business owners screenshotting the unemployment wait times. Like there are 120,000 people in front of you. Like really, these are real screenshots. And so it's super important to know where you are and to constantly be taking the pulse of where you are. But it's much, much more important to understand where you are going. At times like these, you need to have your eye on the ball. They say that when you learn to ride a motorcycle, one of the key things that they teach you is to focus. If you start going into a slide, if your motorcycle starts sliding out from underneath you, you are naturally, people will look right toward the thing they don't want to hit. Well, it seems that what you look toward is where you naturally end up sliding. So they tell you that if you go into a slide on a motorcycle, you are supposed to look towards clear road, away from all of the possible calamities that could hit you. You look at the safe space, and you will literally follow your eyes without understanding how that's even happening. And so in a time like this, it's really important to be focused on where do we go from here. And this is all a really fancy way of saying that we need to be focused on our mission, who we are, and on our vision, where we are going. And in times like this, that might seem like, oh, that's the soft stuff. We really need to be focused on, the dollars and cents and things like that. And I'm not saying don't be focused on the dollars and cents. You should be on the phone with your accountant and financial advisors and everybody else, and you should be thinking of strategy. But you need to be focused on your mission and values and vision in order to survive something like this. So my specialty is burnout. And what's interesting about burnout is when you look at meta-analyses on burnout, you find that these are some of the consequences of burnout. And if you look at this list, which includes things like decreased productivity, reduced organizational commitment, impaired physical health, lowered self-esteem, loneliness, marital conflict. I would wager that many of you have experienced maybe 2, 3, some of you maybe more of the symptoms from this list just since COVID-19 started. And that's because we really are suffering as a nation from burnout right now. Burnout, we're going to talk about as a tripartite construct, but like it has 3 legs to it. But the greatest piece of burnout is emotional exhaustion. And I think just by hearing the term, you would agree that you are probably feeling extremely emotionally exhausted and overloaded from everything going on in your life.
Hey,
And
Dave.
so these are the consequences of burnout. And I would believe that many of us, if not most of us, if not all of us, are suffering from some of these.
David,
Yes.
hear me?
Yes.
I just got in the little chat room. James Dorff said, "What about burnout from Zoom?" And I wonder, I don't want to derail you, but I wonder if you could address that a little bit, because I think people are experiencing that.
Yeah, I think you and I talked about this, didn't we?
Yeah.
What the burnout from Zoom is all about. And I have an article sitting on my computer to read about burnout from Zoom. So I think the word burnout is overused. I don't think that burnout is being used in the scientific term when we talk about burnout from Zoom. But that idea of Zoom is just too much and too exhausting for us, I think is absolutely true. I think there's a lot of different elements there. I think Beth and I think we talked about the fact that you're trying to manage the technical aspects and also the creative aspects at the same time while you're on Zoom, and you get this fatigue from just being in front of a screen. Yeah, I think that there's a lot of burnout there in the colloquial sense, and I also think that we are also getting information overload. I think that all of these Zoom calls are piling up on each other. When this thing first started, everybody had a Zoom call, and I think that we were getting so much information and such heavy stuff. I'm a member of some different groups, and some of these groups, when we get together and we talk, it is extremely draining when everybody's talking about what's going on in their life right now, because there's so much hurt right now, and that can be exhausting as well. So we're all feeling burnout in all of these different elements. I hope that answers the question. But when we look at our frontline workers, and I don't know if anybody here works within those industries or complementary to these industries, but healthcare, nursing homes, when you look at in those areas of business, in 2017, this study found that over 60%, or just about 60% of healthcare workers reported having experienced burnout in the recent past. 60%. So we're talking about a population that already was super high in burnout. And now, through this experience, I really do fear what the outcomes are on the other side of this for those professionals. When about 6 months ago, I have a 6-month-old baby, and when he was just about a week old, we found ourselves back in the ICU, the PICU, I guess they call it, or NICU. I don't know which one's which. So we're in the ICU, and we find ourselves being rushed to the hospital in an ambulance. Our baby, brand new, completely fragile baby, being laid on a table at Johns Hopkins, and learning things that we never wanted to know in our entire life, like how do you tap an IV if you can't access a vein? This was trauma, the greatest trauma that my wife and I had ever experienced in our lives and ever thought to experience. We end up in a room in the ICU with our baby in his little crib, crying, and we can't pick him up to comfort him because he's attached to so many wires. My wife and I are sitting there. Now, I am a professional speaker. My wife is a professional teacher. We talk for a living. We love the sounds of our own voices. We went about 24 hours with barely uttering a word. We sat there in silence and tears. And I remember watching the nurses in this ICU walk in and out, and it was just business as usual for them. It was incredible because I wanted to say, hey, over here, our entire life, our lives are falling apart. We're worried about the life of our child. We have 4 other children at home who are worried and asking questions. Like, see us, look at us, give us a hug, something, give us a word of encouragement. But instead, people were in and out just like business as usual. And I don't blame the nurses, because if they were to connect on a human level with every patient like that, with all of the pain that they see, that job isn't sustainable. How do you do that? So this is a self-protective practice. But when burnout and exhaustion sort of set in for these individuals, they very quickly start to pull back. And that is what our healthcare workers are going to be experiencing at record levels right now and into the near future. When I addressed this with somebody, with one of the nurses that was coming in, and we began to talk about her life, and then she started really connecting, I quickly learned that she's in school to get out of nursing. So I'm worried that people are going to start exiting the profession after all of the stress that they are going through right now. So what is burnout? We talked about there being 3 pieces of burnout. One is emotional exhaustion. And a lot of people seem to understand, oh yeah, exhaustion. And even early burnout research talked about emotional exhaustion as the exhaustion that comes from interactions with your patients. And then over time we learned, well, maybe not, because we've done further studies where we find that interactions with patients actually ignited people. They engaged people. When we talked to healthcare providers who were, and we asked them about incidents that burned them out and incidents that engaged them, the interaction with their patients, their clients, those were the things that actually engaged them, which is the opposite of burnout. So what's happening here? What is emotional exhaustion? Well, emotional exhaustion is not about the client stressors, it's about the workplace stressors. And this is true for every industry. While burnout started as a study about health and human services, it expanded, and social services expanded toward everybody. You find burnout in every industry right now. So when we look at emotional exhaustion, we're not looking at the things that come from the work itself. That's why people got into what they do. Rather, it comes from the workplace stressors. It comes from the bureaucracy. It comes from the vestigial chandeliers, all of the rules that are in place and have no purpose, but stand in the way of your employees doing the most effective work possible. They comes from a lack of autonomy, a lack of decision authority. It also comes from conflict, interpersonal conflict, with their supervisors, with their coworkers, the things that really stand in their way of getting the job done. And finally, it comes from a lack of support. So not only is conflict really integral in causing burnout, a lack of support is going to lead you to burnout much faster than if you have the support from your supervisors and coworkers. Depersonalization is the second piece. And thank God this has been expanded over the past 5 years or so to cynicism, because depersonalization just has way too many syllables. But so depersonalization is this idea that we, my wife, myself, my young 1-week-old son, who thank God is great now, but it's the idea that we stopped becoming the Shars and became room 2. It's pulling back from the work and putting up these shields. When you see doctors, nurses, caretakers start to retreat into their jargon, you know that you are being depersonalized. When they start referring to you as your diagnosis instead of your name, that's a sign of depersonalization. And this happens across the board, and even without client and patient-facing industries or jobs, we look at cynicism overall. And I think right now, not only are the vast majority of us feeling emotional exhaustion, but we're also feeling cynicism. We're wondering whether our jobs were the right fit to begin with. Does it even make sense? Some of us are thinking about early retirement because is this all worth it? We're wondering whether the fight is worth it at a time like this. So we're experiencing these levels of cynicism right now. And the final piece of this is a lack of personal accomplishment. So you have emotional exhaustion, you have the cynicism that starts setting in, and this idea of lack of personal accomplishment. And this happens in real time, and it happens in your head. Oftentimes, it's the fact that we actually do just start churning our wheels, that we are doing the same sort of, putting the same sort of hours in and things like that, but not having the same productivity. And of course we're not, because we've been pulling back. We're now more cynical. We're exhausted. And so we're putting in the same hours, we're churning our wheels and not getting the results. And that effectively causes burnout to come on stronger and faster. The other piece of personal accomplishment is the real life personal accomplishment or lack of personal accomplishment. The ERI is this theory of effort reward imbalance. So when you hire somebody, you give them a contract, either written or verbal, and the contract lays out that you are going to put in effort in this way. That's usually the job description. You're going to show up at this time and work until this time. You're going to work, or you're going to work 40 hours a week or 50 hours a week, whatever it is. You are going to follow whatever's in the job description. These are your duties. Your contract also says what the rewards are going to be. In exchange, we're going to give you a salary or a wage of X. You might also be able to earn bonuses in this way. We also have these benefits, right? And the reward is also things like, just pieces of your culture. We do a monthly birthday party or a pizza party or whatever it is. All of those things are packaged up in the reward. So we have this effort and we have this reward. And when it comes the day that somebody measures these and compares these and realizes there's an imbalance, they're going to experience this complete lack of personal accomplishment. And here's what why this imbalance comes about eventually for most of us. The effort we put in is never going to be just following our job description. I have hired hundreds of people, at least hundreds of people in my life. And I have never and would never hire somebody if I thought that they were going to put in the bare minimum. No, I doubt that any of you have ever said, we really need somebody who's going to put in the bare minimum for this job. Let's find that person. No, of course not. It's almost a social contract. It's almost understood that people are going to go above and beyond. The problem is that works both ways. Employees expect their employer to go above and beyond too, especially when they're going above and beyond. But they don't realize they understand this. They're martyring themselves. And they understand that, and they're good with it. And this is why we see burnout in the greatest degree in these occupations that are objectively meaningful. Occupations where you go and make a difference. So we see burnout at the highest levels with nurses. We see it with social workers. We see it with inner city school teachers and teachers in general. These are people who literally got into their occupation, into their industry, because they wanted to make a difference. We see it in police. We see it in all these things where people get into the work for reasons beyond a paycheck. And we see burnout at higher levels within these organizations or within these industries. And I would argue that that's because of the effort reward imbalance, because we put in everything, we pour in everything. And one day we look to our right and we notice that Tom, who has the same job title and makes the same pay grade, is doing half the work. Or we look and we say, hey, I've been doing all of this and I never even get a thank you. And that's natural because in leadership, within your businesses, first of all, we have a negativity bias. We are much more likely, we are wired to see problems. We are problem solvers, right? We award people for being problem solvers at work. We know that being a problem solver is key to being a good professional, but to be a trained problem solver, to be an effective problem solver, you need to be a problem finder. And so we're constantly looking for the problem. And it's not just in the workplace. This started from when we were cavemen. It was much more imperative to find the saber-toothed tiger, crouched down in the grass waiting for you to come out of your cave than it was to appreciate the sunset. So we have this negativity bias. And so when people are going above and beyond, we're very slow to call them in and give them a pat on the back and an attaboy and do something extra for them and show gratitude in any sort of way, even when it's just saying thank you. We're very slow to that. And so one day we look around as the employee and we say, wait, I put in all of this and what are my rewards? And you realize that there's an imbalance. Many of you as business owners are seeing this right now. How much sweat, tears, time have you put into your business to grow it? And like that, some dude from Wuhan, China ruins that for you? That makes no sense. That's something that happened across the world in a place that many of us had never heard of before, causes your business to just come crashing down. The effort reward imbalance is incredibly strong. The learned helplessness, which is a main precursor to depression, is incredibly strong because we like to find it to feel that we have agency in our lives, right? That our actions cause reactions that are beneficial or not for us, but that we are in control. And in a time like this, we are learning that whatever we do, it seems that it doesn't matter. And that's a very scary and dangerous way of thinking. And so these are all elements that are leading to burnout. On top of all of this, the burnout of just the work changing and the extra duties, etc., we also have layoff survivor's guilt. So layoff survivor's guilt or layoff survivor's sickness is it's a collection of emotions and beliefs that are felt by people who survive the round of layoffs. So if you have a business with 20 employees and you just cut 10 of them, the 10 that were cut, they probably aren't feeling so good. But for a business psychologist, it's not so relevant. They're out of your business now. They're not part of the business, as cold as that sounds. What we're more interested in looking at is, how does this affect the people who are left behind? And it turns out that the people who are left behind, the people who still have the job, will start to experience guilt, anxiety, depression, reduced motivation, anger, and distrust. And that's true with layoffs. We're not talking about where you just reduced your workforce because of some greedy reason. We're talking about layoffs, and layoffs in times like this, where clearly your hands are tied and you have to lay people off. So in a time when we're trying to engage people and limit burnout, but we also have to get rid of people, like this is a recipe for disaster. What's going to happen here? How do you protect yourself? How do you maintain the trust with your people? And so the answer to this is pretty simple. Communicate, over communicate. That's how you build trust. You burn trust by a lack of transparency. But if you're over communicating, you can get yourself in a sticky situation because you cannot promise rainbows and sunshine right now because there is no rainbow and sunshine. We don't even know when we're going to get back to work. We don't know what the economy is going to look like when we get back there. We don't know whether we're going to be able to bring people back or not. And so what are you supposed to say to people? I found this amazing report on in Singapore. The SARS outbreak of, I believe, around 2003 hit Singapore. People were dying at rates much higher than COVID. And within these Singapore hospitals, there was all of this panic. Not a panic of, will I keep my job? The question of, will I keep my life? And this quote is directly from a leader in one of those hospitals on the front line in Singapore during this outbreak. And the person is talking about keeping your life. When he says, there were people who asked, what guarantee did they have to live? No guarantee. But I'm here. We're all in this together. We're all in the same boat. It's not, oh, don't worry, you'll be fine. None of that. Because we really don't know. It's we're here. We're with you. We're all in this together. And I think this is key to the messaging that should be coming from you to your employees during this time. It's not everything will be okay. It's that we will be by your side. And be by your side does not mean that you are going to keep a job, because we don't know. We don't know the viability of the organization, let alone how many people are going to be able to stay on board. But to be by somebody's side when you let them go is courageous. It is rewarding back to you, because it helps with that distrust and anger. It helps diffuse those things. And I'd say it is essential in leadership in a time like this. So when we reach out, so I had an employee that worked for me back in my ice cream days. This employee worked for me for a little while, and I was sort of a newer entrepreneur, and I felt I kept giving this guy a million chances, even though he was a train wreck, right? I kept retraining him. I kept doing all these things. He was a train wreck. The customers wanted him gone. His coworkers wanted him gone. My wife wanted him gone, because clearly he was costing us money. And so one day there was the straw that broke the camel's back, and I had to let him go. I came home that night, and my wife said, so you let him go? I said, yeah. She said, what's wrong? I said, no, I'm just not feeling really great. And she said, why not? She said, you saved our business this way. Like, this guy was literally costing us money. He was disrespectful. Your customers didn't want him. Your employees didn't want him. Why are you feeling down? And I said to her, this guy might not have worked out, but if I ever lose the empathy, if I ever lose the weight of what's going on when I, as an employer, am forced to let somebody go and put their entire livelihood at stake, and put them in a position where they now have to figure out how to feed themselves and or their family. If I ever lose that empathy, if I ever don't shed a tear for somebody I've let go, then I'm getting the hell out of leadership. And like I said earlier, I've let go over 100 people. So I'm not telling you, earlier I said I've hired hundreds. I've let go hundreds too. And so I'm not telling you that to be a servant leader, to be to build this kind of kinder culture. I'm not telling you that you should be a pushover. Absolutely not. But you need to see every side of the story and understand and find the way that what is good for you can be good for the employee or nearly ex-employee as well. And so we protect ourselves by vilifying our employees. We put the idea when we're late, we say, oh, well, it's because I'm so busy. I've got so much on my plate. As well, when one of our employees is late, they don't care. They're disrespectful. They hate the company. They don't care about our customers, right? So this is the fundamental attribution error. This idea, the fundamental attribution error, is this idea that when we mess up, we blame everything external to us. When other people mess up, we blame them and their character. When you trip on the sidewalk, what's the first thing you do? If you're like me, you look behind you at the sidewalk, because clearly something was there that tripped you. When you see somebody else trip on the sidewalk, is that the first thing you do? Is that the first place you look? Probably not. You think, what a klutz. And so this fundamental attribution error is again, this self-preservation that we can let people go and not feel emotional about it. But I'm here to tell you that that's what you signed up for. As a business owner, as a manager, that's your job, to hold the weight of your people. And so when we are open and honest and over communicate and tell people that things are going to work out, we're not telling them that everything is going to be great. What we're telling them is that we're going to be by their side, that if they don't make it, we are more than happy to make introductions to other business owners, that we are more than happy to write them a letter of recommendation if they've earned it. We are more than happy to mentor them if they didn't earn it. If you have somebody that leaves because they're underperforming and you wouldn't recommend this person to anybody, well, tell them, I'd love to get on a monthly phone call, weekly phone call with you and help you out. Coach them, make them a better human and a better employee. Take ownership of your letting other people go. I know it's so much easier and safer to do it the other way, but this will build you a culture that no other competitor can match. So how do we overcome burnout? Well, we have to understand what brings on burnout. So burnout is this emotional exhaustion and lack of personal accomplishment and depersonalization or cynicism. But what leads us to that point? Well, the demand control support model argues that when demand goes up, control goes down, and support goes down, that's the recipe for burnout. So what does this all mean? Well, demand. When we look at right now, demand, we have all of these emotional demands right now. I know that at my house, I'm managing my business and trying to think of it in a completely different way while also helping my kids with their Zoom meetings with their teachers, and suddenly I'm a at-home teacher, and I that's not in my skill set, and so everything's changing, and there's all of this plus the uncertainty of it all, and so demand is at record levels for all of us. Now, how do you overcome demand? Conflict management. So those of you who are managing a newly teleworking team are probably seeing emails come through that are just ripe with passive aggressiveness because everybody's high stress right now. And so conflict is up. Teaching people and helping manage that conflict is key right now. Team building is another thing in general that you can use to help people through this increased demand so that we don't stand in each other's way and put up those barriers, and so that we reduce conflict. And so team building, a lot of people that do similar work to me, they'll take you into a forest and have you do trust falls and call that team building. In my experience, team building is not just about taking one article that says team building is good and then doing things that build a team. You need to build a team within the structure of your culture and your values. And so for team building, for me, it's always, how can we serve while simultaneously team building? What sort of service project can we be doing? And right now, even from home, you and your employees can be doing these service projects, whether it's making masks, whether it's cooking food for first responders and frontline workers, whatever it is, figure out something that is true to the core of who you are as an organization. How can you go and build teams by contributing to the greater good together? Lower the barriers. Think about the chandelier. Look at all of your bureaucracy and formalization, all of your rules, and lower those barriers for people. A true leader is a servant leader, somebody who comes from within and just removes all the barriers so that their people can just do the job that they're there to do. Control. When control is down, and I think that our sense of control has been demolished. There is no sense of control anymore. And so when sense of control is down, we look at things like autonomy. How can you build autonomy? How can you build decision authority? What can you do to give your people a sense of control? And there's so many answers to this question. But one of the things that I think about is I owned this tour company many, many years ago. And in order to learn the roots and learn the history, I would take out ex-mayors of different towns and cities and have them sort of take me on the tour so that I'd learn all of the things. So I'm taking this tour of mayors out in a small town in Maryland that I won't name. And we get to this crosswalk and I lean over and I hit the button and the light's not turning. I hit the button again. And one of the mayors starts laughing. And I'm like, what's so funny? And he said, oh, we had those put in when I was mayor. He said, we had a choice. They could come in and put all of them in and wire them up so they worked, Or we could save $30,000 and they could put the buttons in and not wire them so that they don't work. They're just buttons, fake buttons. And he said, so I saved the city $30,000. I'm like, you put in things that don't work, but of course he did. We could talk about how ethical that is, whatever. That's a whole different conversation. But the fact of the matter is that even with those things not working, when I'm at a crosswalk and I push the button, I have some sense of control. I feel like I'm in control to some degree. And that gives me some calm, and it gives me some autonomy and sense of agency. And this is why that collaboration is so important, to turn to your people, even if you already feel like you have the answers. Turn to them and get their input and make them feel like they're part of the process. And finally, support. Instrumental and emotional. We need to reach out and support our people in every way possible in times like this. The support key is the key to it all. And that means, when we're in the workplace, we can very quickly pass somebody's cubicle and say, hey, how's your mom? That can't happen when we're teleworking, when we're at a distance from each other. So you need to be purposeful and get on the phone and leave time before a meeting, or call somebody explicitly just to check in. It's so important. And the instrumental part in that type of support is, not only does it show your support and make people feel like they've got that sense of community and support, but it also lowers demand because you're there to help them through all of those issues. Let me just close with telework. Telework is so hard for us to trust, and we've talked so much about that chandelier. And what studies have found is that the managers who have been the most hesitant to turn to telework in the past are the managers who also, their personality traits show them to be less trusting in nature. The research is fairly clear that teleworkers report higher job satisfaction, and that teleworkers show greater productivity. And that's not just self-reported productivity. So why have we not turned to telework? Maybe it's because that is the proverbial chandelier. But now you've been forced to turn to it. And so you need to trust people. I always think about all the people suffering through this, and I feel like there is nobody suffering more through this pandemic than those micromanagers that don't trust anyone, now having to manage a teleworking team. Those poor people trying to keep their sanity. I wonder if they're like looking in the windows of their employees' houses. What are they doing in moments like this? It's not a comfortable spot for them. So trust is key here, and support is key. Support for the less tech savvy, for the less conscientious, and even the older workers. And the reason I say older workers is because of this concept of stereotype threat. There are plenty of older workers who are extremely tech savvy. But we have this idea of stereotype threat. And stereotypes are, the research finds that stereotypes are ingrained in us from an extremely young age. We're talking like 5 years old or younger. We start to understand the prejudices within our culture, right? The stereotypes within our culture, rather. And so when we get older and we grow up, we don't only have these stereotypes about other people, but we understand and we internalize the stereotypes about our own people, whatever groups we're a part of. And so that's why you will get a man standing alone in a room, or in a mixed room, or in a room full of men, is going to think and act much differently than a man standing in a room full of women. It's just the way it works, because now suddenly we're primed to think about our masculinity in this room. And so stereotype threat, one of my other favorite studies is the study with Asian American women. They brought in all these Asian American women, and this was years ago when there were co-ed dorms were just starting to become a thing, and they brought them all into a room and they broke them up into 3 groups. And they gave each group a math test. But one of the groups, they just gave the math test to. The other group, they primed them on their femininity. They asked them questions about co-ed dorms and being a woman on a college campus, et cetera, and then gave them the math test. The third group, they primed them on their Asian heritage. They asked them about their ancestors. They asked them about what languages they speak. They asked them about what country their family comes from, et cetera. And then they gave them the math test. And what happened is fascinating. The Asian American women who were primed to think about themselves as women, and this is, a number of years ago when we knew women were not good in STEM, right? Like my wife says, the reason she is not a doctor today is because she had teachers that pushed her away from science and math and toward the English and history. So we have these stereotypes. And so the women who were primed to think of themselves as women did worse than any of the other trials. Now, the women who were primed to think of themselves as Asian American, because of the stereotype that Asian people are better in STEM, those women did better than any of the other trials. Now, there's obviously no like rhyme or reason for this, because you didn't change the groups. The groups were the same groups. Everybody was a woman and everybody was Asian American. But they internalized these prejudices, these stereotypes, and when they did that, it impacted their very performance. So older workers need more attention during this time with the tech support, only because they put themselves in that position. And we need to be very aware of isolation as well. I'll leave you with one very quick story. So my daughter, my wife was driving home from Carroll County. Her parents live all the way out in the boondocks, deep in Carroll County. And she's driving home really late one night. And we had our two oldest, who were our two youngest at the time, our only two kids, 5-year-old Eitan, my son, in the middle seat. In the very back, in the car seat, was my daughter, Rena. And she was about 3 years old at the time. Everybody thought Rena was sleeping. They're driving, and it's dark, and it's quiet. And Eitan's looking out the window when he sees this herd of deer. And he says, "Mommy, what's the purpose of deer?" And my wife starts like turning back on him. She says, "I don't know, honey. What do you think the purpose of deer is?" And so Eitan says, "Well, I don't know." And they start talking about, is it to keep the world beautiful, to keep the brush trim? Is it like to feed the foxes? I don't know. What's the purpose of deer, right? So they're going back and forth, and then the car goes silent again until they hear a peep from the back from Rena, who everyone thought was sound asleep. And she says, "Mommy, what's my purpose?" My wife's brain starts going a mile a minute. What is her purpose? Is she going to invent the next Facebook? Is she going to find the cure for cancer? Is she going to be the first female president of the United States? What is her purpose? And before she can utter a word, my son from the middle seat at 5 years old says, "That's easy, Rena. Your joy. That's your purpose. You make people happy." So my wife is indoctrinated the same way we are all indoctrinated, that to live a purposeful, meaningful, impactful life, we need to somehow end up on the cover of Time magazine. And my son in that moment understood that it wasn't about that. A purposeful, meaningful life is about being authentic. Sorry, I'm using the word, but being your authentic self in a way that positively impacts all of the people that you come in contact with. That's your purpose. And so as the world seems like it's falling apart around us, and as so many of us who have built our identity around our businesses fear that those businesses are crashing down, I wanted you to remain with this lesson. I wanted to leave you with this, the wisdom of a 5-year-old before it becomes corrupted. That your purpose is to be you and to make a positive impact on those around you. And that impact will be much more contagious than any coronavirus or any other disease. So I hope that this was helpful for you. You can reach me in any of these ways. Please feel free to reach out. You can also scan this and learn more about business psychology, burnout, and meaningful work on a bi-weekly basis. By scanning this. Thank you so much.
David, thank you so much. I'm going to unmute everybody in a second here, but I just want to thank you for speaking to our members. We did record this. I may have missed the first few minutes, but as I get used to Zoom. But I certainly learned a lot. I always learn a lot from you. I learn a lot from your beautiful children. David has 5 kids who regularly show up in his LinkedIn profile with their bits of wisdom. And as a mom, I certainly love a professional who is not afraid to take his wisdom and advice from his children. That said, David also is so well versed and has so much research behind what he shares with businesses and corporations. So we want to open it up to questions and answers for anyone who still has time. If you have to dip out for other Zoom meetings, as we talk about Zoom fatigue, or whatever you may need to do, please feel that. But I'm going to unmute everybody. I think I just unmuted everybody. And if you have any questions, David still has some time with us. So feel free. I just want to say, David, you reminded me when you were talking about leadership of Barack Herman, who's the CEO of the JCC. And I don't know if you know, but the JCC just had to furlough all but I think 40 employees. They have around 50 employees. And you talked about being transparent, you talked about communication and the empathy of good leadership. And I just want to say that, you know, in my mind, Barack really demonstrated that. He sent a message out to everybody on Facebook, to the whole membership. And in addition to that, the JCC, while they had to furlough the majority of their employees, they are able to still pay for their health insurance, because so many people, of course, depend on their health insurance through their employer. And I just thought that those were, you know, that spoke directly to what you had to say. So thank you.
Great. Thanks.
Anyone have any questions?
I do.
Yeah, okay, great.
Hi, Stacy.
Okay, hi, David. I had a question for you. How do you organize all these Zoom meetings that are coming in your emails? It's just overwhelming. I forget. I get lost. It's just very stressful. Can you help with that suggestion?
Yeah. So one, I think it's important to say no sometimes. Although I'm very happy you said yes to this one, but you know, I think FOMO is strong, and with Zoom, these meetings are so much more accessible. So we think we have to be on all of them. The truth is that we're all juggling so many things right now, and when you're juggling so many things, balls will be dropped. And I think it is extremely important to be forgiving of ourselves and others right now. But in terms of organization, I usually just put them right into a calendar with all the Zoom information on it. You know, so maybe somebody else has a better tip for that, but I definitely think you are going to miss Zoom meetings. You are going to be pulled in different directions. You are going to want to be in bed for an extra hour one day or take a quick cry. And all of that is 100% okay in a time like this. I think if we think, well, we've got to be so tough, that's only going to make things worse. If you continue to think you have to be perfect at everything and really be that overachiever that so many of us are on a regular basis, I think we need to excuse ourselves from that a little bit.
Thank you.
Any other questions for David?
I don't know if I have questions. Hi, David. How are you?
How's it going?
I'm Lisa Gorman. I oversee career services at Jewish Community Services. So we're deeply entrenched in all of this because our organization is 100% up and running. But a couple comments. I can relate to everything you said, David. I mean, we're living it every single day. But I just want to tell you from the career standpoint, and our agency is seeing it all because we are full social services. We're seeing all the things. I'm seeing the career stuff, but we meet as a senior management group once a week, and we're hearing all of, you know, we go in, we do elder care, we do all of that. So we're faced with all of it. We're seeing lots of silver linings, and it is not all doom and gloom. And the first thing I would tell you is stop watching the news all day. We find the people that are, they're first of all, a lot of it's wrong. And secondly, you will be down. But, you know, it's a good example, Beth, you brought up the JCC. So we've been in touch with them. We're working with some of those people. So many of the people that are furloughed are so happy. Everybody's like, when we immediately, as soon as that came out, and we kind of knew at an agency, it's obvious it was going to happen. 100 people were furloughed. There are no jobs for them. They are like a retail establishment. So you're not all going to have jobs. So people were shocked. If you think about it, it's not shocking at all. But we heard, interestingly enough, who we kept hearing from, phone calls, emails, was not the people furloughed. It was everyone else that went into panic thinking they should be panicked. The furloughed people, for the most part, in many industries across the whole country, are doing okay, especially when they're in a situation where their benefits are being paid for. And also, you have to remember, many people getting unemployment right now are making more money than they were making because of the way they have set this up. So some of them are thrilled. So it's not, you're hearing, oh, horrible, horrible. We heard from one furloughed person of the 100. Everybody else in the community we heard from, oh my God, what are you doing? What are you, they're not all crying. You know, it's not all doom and gloom. We had a lot of silver linings because we are going to have a virtual career center ultimately this year anyway. We're launching. So we've worked from people all over the world virtually for years now. So for us, this was all awesome. But yeah, there's a lot of silver linings out there. And I don't want people walking away. We're trying to tell people this every day. We have so many stories of great things that have happened. Really high-level professionals that in the last 6 weeks have gotten their dream jobs. There are more jobs there than there have ever been out there, first of all, opening up different kinds of jobs. But if you need to make money, there's all kinds of options. So I just want to put that out there because you hear only doom and gloom, and that's not really the whole picture. My husband's a physician at University of Maryland. He's on the front lines all day, works 7 days a week till late at night. He's opening a COVID unit this week himself. So I'm hearing all of it. So I know, and he would tell you the same thing. You know, the burnout of those people, they're not burnt out in the way you were right on with that, David. They go in, it's their work. They go in every day. You don't hear them complain. It is a different type of burnout. It's everybody else you hear complaining. Mm-hmm. So, but they go in, it's their work. That's what they do every day. So they don't think of it like that. So I just want to put it out there because we as an agency hear a lot of doom and gloom, but it's not all doom and gloom.
I love that, Lisa. And thank you. And Lisa's amazing. And everything they do at JCS is amazing.
Oh,
so.
Thank you, David. I'm here, by the way. I'm here because David is a friend of our agency and we love him. And I wanted to hear, I will hear you speak anywhere. So,
well, thank you.
And really, if anyone has any questions about anything, we are all things to all people right now. Send them our way because we're happy to talk to anyone and we're checking in. We're doing all kinds of stuff. So send them our way if you're hearing stuff.
Well, plus if you're planning for the future, this past week, I think they're putting in a lot of money in the budget for testers and tracers. So if you're building a company and you're looking to build a company dealing with tracers and you own it, you can make a ton of money with those people, just FYI. There's money there and there's money going to be put in there soon.
So can I speak to that? Because this is something very near and dear to our heart as the Career Center. There are a million companies already out there doing it and a ton of hiring has happened and it's still happening. So if you know people who need jobs, there are tons of them out there. They can go to the CDC website. There's a lot on there. And Baltimore County, many of you heard probably this morning, just started CCBC. We've been in touch with them this morning. They have a free 3-hour training program for anyone who wants to do that. It's very easy. The link was, when we called early this morning, they were having problems with the link. We were testing it out with them. It's working now. It's up and running. And Baltimore County is hiring people through that. It's a partnership. It's really easy to do, and you do it remotely. And then there are on the national level, there's thousands of jobs open right now for it.
Awesome.
Lisa, I just want to say, let's you and I be in touch, because the Chamber can help promote what the JCS is doing. And I think that members are so busy and so inundated, they forget that we're a resource, and that we are promoting all of our members, especially right now. We you know, it'd be great to have some testimonial videos to post on our Facebook to say, hey, it's not all doom and gloom out there, and there are jobs.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, let's have a conversation.
Okay, and you know, Lisa Cohn, I think, regularly comes to your meetings.
Yes,
she's here.
she
Like,
does.
She's our account reps are working crazy. Everyone's working.
Sure.
The one thing we have seen is so different is everyone's working like 13, 14-hour days.
Right.
They're working nonstop 7 days a week. So that's, so we are also doing tons of virtual programming for the community. I have two of my staff members are doing a discussion group tomorrow, I think it's at 10 o'clock. On how to work from home. I did a webinar on working from home. We have people working on who have done webinars on how to work on your LinkedIn profile and your resume at home. This is the time when people can be doing a ton of work,
Right.
in branding yourself and re-looking at your career and certifications, etc. Tons of stuff you can be doing from home that you couldn't comfortably do before. Take advantage of it. So we have a lot of virtual program for the entire agency. That's just my area. We're going to be doing, by the way, we are going to be doing employer discussion groups. Michael Fine is working on that as we speak in the next few weeks, to have employers come together to talk about their needs, because we do all employer stuff too. So we will, let's talk about that, because we're promoting it all over social media and sending out email blasts, but you hit, I'm sure, people that we don't hit as well. So that would be great.
Wonderful. Anyone else?
Is everybody else finding they're working like 1 million hours?
I know I am.
Way more than usual, right? Right. We definitely are.
Yeah, for sure. I'm in a new realm altogether of figuring out the SBA loans, PPP, you know, who's eligible, who's ineligible, so we can.
Very confusing.
Yeah.
Yeah. We, JCS got one of the loans, so we're very fortunate. Good. The JCC did not, which is why you're hearing the furlough.
Oh.
That's why the people who didn't get the loans really don't have a choice to some extent, you know. So there's round 2 now, so we'll see what happens. We got it in they got ours in at 12:01 the first night you could, because the heads up around the country was, it's first come, first serve, you better do it quick, because everybody's applying. So so we're very fortunate we got it in round 1.
That's great. Yeah, the PPP is first come, first serve. Our chamber applied for the EIDL when it was advertised as being $10,000 fast cash. And they walked that back to $1,000 per employee only. And so I don't want to go too off topic here from what David was talking about, but you know, it's challenging. And I think all of the associated agencies are 501c3s, and David knows this. The chamber is a 501c6, so we are ineligible for any and all federal aid. Nothing applies to us. So we're hoping in phase 4, because we're at 3.5, phase 4, we're hoping, and we're really working with state and federal delegates to get the C6s and the aid package. But I'd love to promote the JCS, Lisa, and all that you're doing, and
That
actually
would be awesome.
to have you come on like David did and do a webinar for our members.
Okay, that would be great.
We're sending an
Just
email
so
out
you know
today.
too, we have a resource page linked off of on our website to
Okay.
all kinds of resources all over the community and the state. So, you know, feel free to share that.
I will
As
share
we
that.
hear more, we try to put it on there. We're trying to be a resource for all things on our website as well. Not
Great.
just through the phone calls, but through our
Yeah.
website as well.
Great. I will share that. All right. Anyone else? I want to thank you all so much for coming. David did share his contact information, and I will share it with you all as well through email. But we wish everybody health and safety. And again, thank you for joining.
Thank you for having it.
Thank you. We're gonna have a lot more virtual events come May. So look in your emails. We're gonna have some happy hours and more of like what David offered us today. So David, again, thank you so much for that great talk.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
It's nice
Thank you, Beth.
outside.
Right.
Take
All
care.
right. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.